Okay class, now let's talk about Linux and DHCP, and we'll do a brief overview of what DHCP is. So Linux supports DHCP addressing, and it can host its own DHCP service role, just like a Windows system. And DHCP is a service that assigns TCP or IP settings to clients and servers, such as IP address, subnet mask, gateway, DNS servers. You can set up scopes, and lease times for all this IP information also in Linux. In Linux, DHCP supports both IPv4 and IPv6, but we'll only be touching on IPv4 for class. And you could also set up DHCP failover. So to install DHCP onto your server, you need to install the DHCP service package. And you gotta make sure you have your internet connection to be sure to get this package. So to do this, you'd run the command sudo apt-get install isc-dhcp-server. And once this command is ran, it'll go through the process of installing DHCP and all the necessary files. So as with all Linux services, DHCP is configured by updating a set of configuration files. More specifically, the dhcpd.conf, dhcpd.conf file, which is located in the etc DHCP directory. And then one thing you always gotta make sure you have when installing the DHCP service is that you have a static IP address set up in your interfaces file. So within the DHCP configuration file, you can configure subnets to have certain network numbers, net masks, subnet mask. You can set up your routers or gateways, your DNS servers. You can set lease time, domain name, and scopes. And you can also define reservations within your DHCP configuration file. You'll also see when editing your DHCP configuration file is that you have a set of option parameters. And these parameters are used to provide additional information to your client systems, to your servers, to anything connected to your DHCP service. And there are tons of option parameters for us to edit and use to our advantage. And you can view all of these by viewing the man page for DHCP options. But the important ones for us are domain-name, domain-name servers, and routers. And another thing you need to remember is that all declarations within this configuration file must end with a semicolon. So let's go ahead and take a look at that DHCP configuration file. So we'll do sudo vim etc dhcp /dhcpd.conf. And we'll enter in our admin password. And we'll be brought to our configuration file. So let's go ahead and enter insert mode. So within this file, you'll see that we have lots of blue text, which is commented out with the pound symbol. And anything that's currently in use would be in white. There's tons of options here. We have our option domain name like we were talking about, and we have our option domain name servers that we could set up in here too. We could set our default lease time or our max lease time, which are done in seconds. And we could also set our DHCP system to be authoritative, which is what we'll enable also. So before we start editing this file, let's go ahead and make sure our host name and our fully qualified domain name is already set up. And to do that, we'll be editing the hosts and hostname file. So let's go ahead and set our host name with the command that we learned. Sudo hostname ctl set-hostname. And let's change it to 639 ubuntu.unm.edu. And we'll push enter. And let's verify that it changed. And we'll see that it did change. So now let's change our FQDN for our server. And to do that, we'll edit our host file. So we'll do sudo vim /etc/hosts. We'll go into insert mode, and we'll add the static IP address we set for our system, 192.168.0.10. And then we'll add our new host name to it. 639 ubuntu.unm.edu. And let's go ahead and update our Ubuntu server record we already have here to match. So let's go ahead and save this file now. And we'll go ahead and reboot our system. Now that our system is rebooted, let's go ahead and log back in. And you'll see that our host name has updated and changed to what we set it to, 639 Ubuntu. Now let's get back to editing that DHCP file. Okay, so now that we're back in here, let's go back into insert mode. And let's update our option domain name. And this is where we'll put the host name that we just set. So it'll be 639 Ubuntu .unm.edu. And make sure it's ended with a semicolon. And now let's update our domain name servers to include the UNM domain name addresses. So that'll be 10.3.33.10 and 10.3.32.10. And now we can set our release time for all of our DHCP scopes that we create. But for now, let's just leave them as is. And let's turn our DHCP server into the authoritative one. And we'll just remove the pound symbol. Next, let's create a super very basic subnet range, a scope, for our DHCP server to use to hand out IP addresses. And let's just scroll down. And we should find a scope that's already pre-set up that we can just comment out. So let's go ahead and just delete the pound symbols and edit what we have here. So let's change the subnet to match our subnet that we're using in the VLab. So it'll be 192.168.0.0. And then we'll set the subnet mask. So we have the first three 255s, and just we need to change the last one to 0. Now let's set a range for our DHCP scope to hand out. So let's delete what we already have here. We'll start at 192.168.0.15. And we'll have that range go for 10 IP addresses. 192.168.0.25. And now let's utilize this routers option we have here to set up our default gateways, our routers. We'll delete everything that's already here and add in our gateway address, 192.168.0.1. So anything within this scope that gets an IP address will not have that gateway defaultly assigned to it. I'm going to do this for our subnet mask, for any other settings that we have options for. And if you wanted to, you can add an additional range within your DHCP scope. For example, we could do range 192.168.0.30 to 192.168.0.40, semicolon. And now this DHCP scope can now hand out IP addresses within either of those ranges. And now let's look at setting a reservation within Linux DHCP, Ubuntu DHCP. So to do that, all we need is the MAC address of the client system that we're trying to set the reservation for, and then we just put that entry into our DHCP configuration file. And you can declare this reservation anywhere within this file. So let's just do it right here. To declare a reservation, we start off with host. We give it a name. So I know the MAC address for the Windows 7 system I have in this network. So we'll just say Win7, open bracket, close bracket. And then we first enter in our MAC address for our system. And to do that, the parameter used for that is hardware Ethernet. And then we just key in our MAC address. So in our cases, it's 00:1F:6A:21:713F. And then we end it with a semicolon. And now we'll assign it its static IP address, its reserved address, with the fixed address parameter. So let's go and just give it 192.168.0.11, semicolon. And then if we really wanted to, we could add any of the option parameters we have available to us. So if we had a different gateway, we could do option routers and give it that address. Just for example, 192.168.1.1. Or whatever other gateways you may have, or domain names, or net masks you want to set for it. But we don't need that for our cases. But do know you can do that. And that's all you need to set up a DHCP reservation. So let's go ahead and save our DHCP configuration file. And now there's only one thing for us left to do. And that's to restart our DHCP service. And you can do that with the command sudo service isc-dhcp-server restart. And that's pretty much how DHCP works. Once you have it installed and configured correctly and running the way it needs to, you could then connect your client systems to your DHCP server. That way you could get all of your assigned IP address settings that you set up in your scope and whatever DNS servers you have automatically, and assign the DNS servers automatically, and any of the specific defined settings you have configured in your DHCP configuration file. What you'll want to do for your Linux systems is to make sure that DHCP is enabled within their interface file. And then after that setting is set, you'll need to restart your networking service, like we did with our Ubuntu server. And that's all it takes to set up a DHCP server on your Ubuntu systems.